This International Women's Day, I wanted to move beyond the slogans and ask more honest questions. What does it really feel like to be a woman building a career in business right now? So, I invited a cross section of women, from those just starting out to leaders at the height of their influence, to reflect candidly on their experiences. As a founder, leadership coach, and a woman of color who has navigated ambition, reinvention, bias, burnout, and the evolving expectations placed on women over the course of a career. I'm really less interested in polished narratives and more interested in truth. What's changed? What hasn't? What's it costing us? And what still feels possible? The responses that follow come from women across industries, generations, and leadership levels. Their reflections touch on everything from geopolitics and systematic bias to motherhood, menopause, confidence, exhaustion, and hope for the future. Together, they offer a powerful snapshot of where women in business really stand today and where we may be headed next. I asked them five simple questions, but they reveal many things.
If we look at the bigger picture, since my mother or even my grandmother started their careers, things are definitely improving. But without doubt, barriers still exist. In the creative industries, there's a disproportionate number of women entering the workplace, but it tends to be men who still dominate at leadership positions. And in the freelance sector, it's equally precarious for women, especially if they don't have financial stability or the networks. There's also subtle but persistent challenges around gatekeeping, recognition, confidence, all of these things. And at the current pace of progress, the pay gap is not going to close until 2056. That means that for the first 47 days of this year, women were effectively working for free. And for women in the 50 to 59-year-old age group, it's a staggering 72 days, which is absolutely crazy. At that pace, it's going to take until my daughters are older than me for there to be parity in pay between men and women. So that's why government, companies, not-for-profits, everyone needs to actively work together to remove structural barriers, and women need to continue to support each other.
Right, so there have absolutely been moments where all three, bias, exclusion, exhaustion, at different times altogether, really shook my confidence. And yes, I definitely started to second guess myself, felt like I should be doing better, like I should be coping better, wondering if I had a problem that needed fixing. It was a really subtle, gradual process of erosion that just suddenly hit me. I think like it does for a lot of women who are, ambitious, in high pressure, senior, leadership roles. I think what helped me rebuild self-trust, it was a gradual process, but ultimately it was about understanding that my distress, that what I was experiencing made sense in the context that I was in. So it wasn't that, I was the problem, but actually the issue that, I was experiencing was part of a bigger systemic issue, and an issue that was about the way that my organisation worked, thought about people or didn't think about people, and how it responded to not just mine but people's needs. I learned that I didn't have to become tougher. I learned that I needed to become clearer about what I was willing to allow and what I wasn't willing to allow, become clear about my boundaries, become clear about my values, the values that I wanted to lead and live from, where I felt safe, where I didn't feel safe, and why. And I think that's what organisations often miss about women's resilience. Sometimes I think that organisations might see, resilience as a strength, but actually in reality it's often a survival response, and it isn't evidence that a culture is, or an environment or an organisation is healthy or functioning well. I think just because a woman is coping doesn't mean that she's thriving, and I think really understanding the difference between somebody being really high functioning or being high performing, really being at their best. And I think the real question for me is, how would organisations even know the difference? Like, are organisations creating the space to ask? Are they willing to hear the answer? And are they willing to adapt if they hear something that is uncomfortable for them? So for me, organisations aren't asking the right questions, really.
When I'm asked whether the path for women in business is widening or narrowing, my instinct is to say both. I've seen real progress. I sit in rooms today that 20 years ago I would not have been invited to. That matters. But I've also felt the tightening. In moments of economic or political uncertainty, power tends to consolidate. And that's when you start to notice the difference between being present and truly having influence. Working across different countries and sectors, academia, business, government, I've often felt I had to build credibility twice. Once to prove competence, and once again to be granted legitimacy. Especially as a foreigner, as a midlife woman, in rooms still very much dominated by older men. So I've learned that being direct, being clear, pragmatic, willing to question assumptions, can sometimes make people uncomfortable. There's often subtle pressure to soften that clarity. For a while I wonder even if I should. Over time I realized something else. Resistance isn't always personal. Systems protect themselves. So looking 10 years ahead, I am hopeful. Not because everything is improving, but because the problems we face are too complex for old models of leadership. They demand coordination, steadiness, and the ability to hold ambiguity. Many women have been required to develop those capacities. My hope is not simply that more women rise within existing structures, is that we help redefine how power is exercised with more design, more stewardship, and more courage.
My name is Rosie Nixon, and when I suffered burnout in 2022, it had a huge impact on my mental and physical life and my relationship with the workplace. The stats speak for themselves. They show that 1 in 3 women in the UK are suffering from chronic exhaustion, stress and burnout, and those statistics don't lie. They're very harrowing to read, and it's no wonder. I think this feeling of overwhelm has become a currency within the workplace. When I was forced to look at things differently, I realised that there was a lack of system in place and support for women going through the various life stages that affect us differently to men in the workplace. And by that I mean fertility journeys, pregnancy, menopause and other hormonal shifts. I believe that the system is still not supporting women as best as it can be, and that is the responsibility of the workplace, but it's also our own responsibilities. Coaching was transformative to me. Having the ability now to self-coach and the framework I've developed to support women through transitional times and how to navigate change, I believe can help us all have a healthier relationship with the balls that we all have to keep in the air. I still think a lot needs to be done, but I always have hope and positivity about the future. The more that we can open up these conversations around the challenges that we face, both in the workplace and through different life stages, the better. I think we've moved a lot further forward on this level, but there is still lots of work to be done.
There are documented incidents of discrimination in my office where promotions and salary adjustments were granted to white employees while minority employees were not even considered. A significant point of frustration is that management appears unaware that many of us, across various ethnic and professional backgrounds, are fully aware of the discriminatory transactions. There is a pervasive sense that management expects us to be satisfied with crumbs, despite the fact that these opportunities and higher compensations are often awarded to white employees with less education and experience. My ambition affected many aspects of my life. While I was working full-time, I furthered my education at night and on the weekends. This affected my ability to socialize with friends and family, experiences I miss and will never be able to get back. While working in exempt positions, I did what was necessary to successfully perform my duties. This often meant working 12-hour days and reporting to the office on weekends, leaving little time for vacations. Consequently, my health was affected. Physically, I was tired, not eating healthy, and not exercising as I should have and as I did in the past. I was once an avid walker and hiker, but let those activities fall by the wayside to work harder and longer. My expectation was that my hard work and accomplishments would be recognized and fairly compensated. In the future, my leadership journey will involve limiting overwork and increasing self-care.
Hey everyone, my name's Heather Fisher, Rugby World Cup winner and very proud Olympic athlete. Now, the question is, what have I sacrificed in terms of my ambition to be where I am? Well, the truth is, I've sacrificed my hair. No chance. No, I did. No, actually, being honest with you, when you step out to be an Olympic athlete age 15, of course you make sacrifices. You make conscious choices to want to be the very best you can be. But I knew that to step out, but it didn't take away the fact that when I turned 38 years old, I suddenly got the palpitations in the chest and I walked away from my England contract with only 2 years to go until the Tokyo Olympics. And I felt so stressed and my stomach was churning, and the truth is that as a female aged 38, I suddenly realised I've got all the England shirts in the world, my name's known on the world stage, but yet I haven't got a mortgage, I've not got a family, I've not got a consistent partner, I've not got anything to my name that allows me to be stable and ready for life. I remember interviewing Denise Lewis for the BBC, and I asked Denise Lewis, can a woman have it all? And she said to me, Fish, she can, but she can't have it all at once. I think that's the great way to be able to summarise it, because as an athlete you make sacrifices and you know that these sacrifices will go on for as long as your career goes on to. Now, of course, it enabled me to play on the world stage and become what I do now, which is amazing, so I wouldn't change it. But the difficulties along the way, and I think it summarised it nicely when Denise said you can't have it all at once, is so true, because there are sacrifices made, and when I left that squad at 38 years old, it was because I was so stressed about my future because I didn't have anything. And that's very different to the boys. So the sacrifices I've made, I've been aware of them the whole time. It's not been easy, I've had to start to understand it. And then when you come out of sport and you transition out into the real world, yikes, it's like another hurdle, because you're having to start from scratch. And then you're having to work out if you want a family first, or you want to be able to get stability first, or I need to have a job. I need to now start to earn money and start to create the next part of my future. So yes, there's a lot to think about. Would I change any of it? No, and I couldn't to some extent. Do I wish there was more support there for women in the industries and in the industries that we're all in? Yes, but I think we're doing such a great job that women are starting to push women, which is wicked. There was probably only room for one woman at the top. Now there's room for so many that actually we're lifting people up, which is what it's about. It's about lifting other women up so they can be at their best too. And that's what's amazing. We've got an amazing platform here to be able to do amazing things. So let's use it, and I'll catch you on the other side real soon. Take care. Fish.
I think one of the most misunderstood things about investing in a female founder is that it only comes in the form of a big fact check. And whilst that would be very nice, it also comes in the form of just buying the stuff, right? Just making a purchase, conscious consumption. It's about taking somebody into the room with you, talking about them, their products, their services when they can't be there. It's as simple as engaging with their brand on social media. So I think if we really want to support female founders, we all have the opportunity to do so. Am I optimistic for the future of women in business? Yes, I am. We need to improve the funding for women across the board, specifically for Black and brown women who fare an awful lot worse when it comes to investment and funding. And as we see women grow their businesses, make money and invest in other female-founded brands, I think we're going to speed that up. The world is a crazy place right now. Well, the qualities, the feminine qualities that of course exist in both men and women, of caring and compassion and nurturing, are more vital than ever. Yes, around the boardroom and also in life generally. So yes, I am optimistic.
The landscape for working parents in the UK has improved considerably since my children were born. There is now shared parental leave and expanded government childcare support. However, the mental load still falls disproportionately on mothers. For women in senior leadership roles, some of that burden can be shared with grandparents or paid help. But if one is at the top of a poorly remunerated sector, such as the arts, outsourcing might not be financially viable. There are fundamental structural problems that affect women more than men. The British education system was built on the premise that there would always be one parent at home, typically the mother. The math says it all. In the UK, the school year comprises 190 teaching days, less for independent schools. However, most full-time employees work at least 220 days annually, and often considerably more, especially if they have leadership ambitions or work in professions that demand visibility, networking, and travel. This discrepancy leaves parents scrambling all the time, even before accounting for the 3 p.m. school pickup. However, this deep structural misalignment is one that affects women more often than men. A woman's labour is often invisible and cyclical, leaving little physical trace. Groceries are bought and turned into meals. School emails are monitored. Homework is supervised. Forms are completed, clothes are replaced, play dates are organised, gifts sourced, and much else besides, all before the process begins again next week. There is continuous project management and emotional oversight, which most of the time is undervalued. This pressure at home frequently coincides with a woman's desire to advance professionally, but also with menopause and often taking care of aging parents. It is a continual act of negotiation and compromise that middle-aged mothers, who are also senior leaders, are frequently expected to undertake, and often at the expense of our own well-being.
For me, I would say that ambition has been something which I've always had in spades, and I found at times that my ambition has sometimes clouded my judgment for what is actually best for me. So I will sometimes work the hours that are too late, volunteer for too many things, and end up then with no energy for anything else. So I'd say ambition is amazing to have, but it's something that you have to manage proactively, and I've learned that the hard way through burnout and other things. So it's definitely a really interesting one, and it's something that going forward as my life changes, one day I hope to have kids. When that happens, eventually menopause, that's all things that I've seen older women go through in my family, and watching the way that they've had to deal with it with such grace. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm hoping that by the time I get to that point, things will be better in the workplace, more provisions for women going through these changes of life. So I do feel hopeful for the next 10 years as well for women in business. I think that there's a lot of great changes, a lot more education coming through I'm just hoping that we can keep up for it. You know, the current geopolitical state of the world is scary. And traditionally, when things like that happen, women's roles and women's rights tend to get pushed further down the list. So I'm just hoping that as sort of a world, we can all work together to make that be better longer term. So I'm hopeful, I'm an optimist, but we'll have to keep watching what Trump does.
I think that actually maybe moving in the world as a freelancer gives me a little bit more freedom. A lot of the time people don't see my face, like they can't put a face to the name. It's not really about my gender, it's just about the quality of my work. And because no one is meeting a quota or having to like encounter me in the workplace, I feel like maybe it works in a different way to normal discrimination against women. In general, I do feel hopeful. I haven't personally felt like I've been discriminated against in the workplace. The only difference that I've felt is between me and my male counterparts, where I feel a bit more unsure of myself. They seem to have a confidence even though we have the same level of experience. But I guess that's something that women will just have to work on, that we have a right to be where we are, and that even if someone is acting with a bravado, that doesn't mean that they're any better than you. But yeah, in general, I feel good about it.
Hearing these reflections, I'm reminded that progress for women has never been linear. It's been hard fought, often exhausting, and far too often uneven. Over the course of my career as a journalist, as a founder, a leadership coach, and a Black woman, navigating rooms that weren't always designed for me, I've seen the landscape shift in meaningful ways. Doors have opened that were once firmly closed, but many of those doors still require women to push harder than they should have to. What gives me hope is not the systems. Systems change slowly. What gives me hope is women, our resilience, our intelligence, our willingness to support one another while still demanding more from the structures around us. The next chapter for women in business will not be written by waiting patiently for parity. It will be written by women who continue to lead, challenge, build, and refuse to shrink in rooms that were never designed to contain us.